Welcome back. Over the past 8 meditations, we have been considering Paul's prayer for the believers of Colossae, recorded in the first chapter of his letter to them, and then the reasons for Paul's thankfulness to God. Chiefly considering then, in those, what it states about who Christ is and what he has done for us. In the first of those meditations, we considered Paul's prayer for the believers in Colossae to be filled with the knowledge of God's will. Paul ends his epistle to the church by providing a short testimony regarding a man named Epaphras, in which Paul returns to this topic of praying for understanding regarding to the will of God. We read in Colossians chapter 4, verses 12 and 13, Epaphras, who is one of you, a bondservant of Christ, greets you, always laboring fervently for you in prayers, that you may stand perfect and complete in all the will of God. For I bear him witness that he has a great zeal for you, and those who are in Laodicea, and those in Hierapolis. Epaphras was one of those quote-unquote behind-the-scenes servants. In fact, Paul refers to him as a bondservant of Christ. Again, literally, that is the word doulos, is a slave or an indentured servant, someone who indentured themselves for the payment to someone else. That Epaphras then was one of these, if you would, support staff that strengthens, encourages, enables, and assists in the work of the ministry of someone else who tends to receive the limelight like Paul did, rather than all those people who are assisting him behind the scenes. In chapter 1, Paul stated that Epaphras was, quote, our dear fellow servant, who is a faithful minister of Christ on your behalf, who also declared to us your love in the Spirit. Epaphras was this man who came alongside Paul in his ministry, but also the entirety of the believers in Colossae, that his ministry was on behalf of the believers in Colossae, that he then came alongside Paul in his ministry as well. And Paul states that Epaphras labored fervently in prayer for the believers of Colossae and Laodicea and Hierapolis. You'll probably recognize the Greek word translated, quote-unquote, labored fervently. It's the word agonizomai. Agonizomai. That may not sound like, but let me say it slower. Agonizomai. Agonizomai. It's where we get our word agonize from. This word refers to being in a fight or in a struggle. Consider quickly some biblical usages of the term. 1 Timothy 6, verse 11 and 12. But you, O man of God, flee these things and pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, patience, gentleness. Fight, that's our word, the good fight of faith. Lay hold on eternal life, to which you were also called, and have confessed the good confession in the presence of many witnesses. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7 and 8 we read, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Finally, there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have loved his appearing. And then in Hebrews 12, verse 1 and 2, we read, Therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight in the sin which so easily ensnares us. Let us run with endurance the race, or literally the fight, the struggle that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Sometimes prayer can be a struggle, a battle, a fight. Remember, we spent much time considering the fact that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, that we actually are engaged in a spiritual war. And Satan does not want you to be involved in that battle. He will do whatever it takes to discourage you from being involved in that battle. We need to be committed and determined in the fight, in the struggle. Note that Epaphras prays then as well for the believers in Colosse and Laodicea and Hierapolis to be perfect and complete in all the will of God. When telos and pleroma, that's perfect and complete, are used together, it signifies this totality of perfection, this completion of maturity. Epaphras prayed for those that he knew and that he loved, that they would fully understand, fully comprehend the totality, the completion, having maturity in the will of God. We need to be willing to fight the good fight. We need to be willing to endure the struggle that sometimes is laid upon us, that God allows us to go through, to agonize in prayer for one another, specifically that one another, that we each would be able to comprehend what is the fullness, what is the completion, what is the understanding then of the will of God in their lives, in our lives, at this time. And then that we would, knowing the will of God, submit to it. Pray and have a blessed